You're listening to the Bear in Mind Podcast, episode 131.
A podcast that breaks it down so you can break the cycle for good. Now, your host, Tara Rama, but you can call her T.
Today's episode is going to get a little bit breathy. I'm going to be talking about breathing exercises. And I guess the most common advice out there, if you Google it, and you can read that in order to manage anger, that we should catch our breath, take a breath to calm down. If our kids are screaming, leave the room and breathe, and that'll help. And I'm not here to negate that advice because it is really useful in that moment when you are angry, if you catch yourself, to take a moment and take a breath. And what I find lacking in some of this advice is it often misses the point of that purpose of why you're taking that breath. Yes, you have caught yourself in the moment, and that is really essential. But what was happening to me when I read stuff like this and kind of take space apart? And I'm going to use my husband. So when we have had arguments, is when the argument gets heated, both of us now have kind of said, okay, let's take a moment and we'll calm ourselves down, and then we'll come back together and talk about it. And that's happened over years and years. That was not always the case. And so when I would go and do these breathing exercises, I would come back and then the argument would escalate. Even though I had taken space and I was like, okay, I'm going to breathe. But oftentimes we're breathing like this. We're like, I need to take breaths. Excuse me for that, breathing into the microphone. I need to take these breaths. So you're taking these breaths and then there's nothing as a result of that. And I'm here to tell you that I'm going to add to that breathing exercise, because the result of doing that breathing exercise is to actually, you'll get a lot of results, but is to actually process that emotion that you're feeling in that moment. And by processing an emotion, and I've talked about emotions, the root word, you can tell that it's emotion. And then the other part of that word is the E, which stands for EX. And EX stands for move out or out. It stands for out or through, like exit. So EX and then emotion, that movement, which is basically what an emotion is. It's movement in your body, and you want to get it out of you. And that is where the breathing exercises are really helpful. And it's often misguided when we're said, hey, go take a breath, do your breathing exercises. So I'm going to go a little bit in depth. So when you do a breathing exercise and you're able to catch yourself, maybe you're yelling, and you go to do a breathing exercise, it needs to be very intentional rather than you're still angry and you're still kind of holding on to it and only a little bit of that anger has gone away. What the breathing exercise is, first a full breath. It's actually inhaling as much air and then sitting with it and then exhaling it out really slowly. And I'm going to even add more to that. When you take that intentional breath, is that with each intentional breath, you do something. And it's called a body scan. It's called checking in with your body. And I think I've mentioned this in other episodes, so I want to go a little bit more in detail. So let's say you've had an argument or you were yelling or something like that, and you get some space and you take in, you inhale, and then you exhale. And when you exhale, you find out what's happening in your body. And all you need to do is say, where do I feel something in my body? Do I feel it in my stomach? Do I feel it in my hands? And you just need to identify where it is the emotion has taken root in your body. And it's going to be different for everybody. For me, a lot of times, and it's a very common thing, but it's in the chest or in the stomach. And so when you take that breath, the first thing you need to do is locate where you're feeling any sort of tension, pinching, tingling, pressure, all of that. Where is it? And name it. Actually name it. I feel it in my stomach. And you don't have to be specific about the organ. It's where in your lower body you feel it in your stomach. And then you take in another breath. And then you ask yourself, well, okay, I feel it in my stomach. How big is it? and you describe it with each breath. You just ask one question. How big is that? Let's say it's pressure. How big is that pressure? Is that pressure moving? Is that pressure feeling soft or hard? Does it have texture to it? Does it have color to it? And you try to describe it in this multidimensional way. And I'll give you a tip for that. So describing it's very simple words, and it's as if you're describing it to a 4-year-old, a 5-year-old. Or this is what I was taught when I was getting certified as a life coach, is that you to try to describe it to an alien that does not know what an emotion is. So with each breath, you answer one of those questions. And this is what you call a body scan. And you do this until you feel that pressure actually move, because what's happening is that emotion is not moving out. It's not exiting the body. So you're holding on to it. And this is why you can feel angry, even though anger is a reactive emotion. It's a fast moving emotion. That's why sometimes you can hold on to anger longer and still come back and yell. That was my situation. And so once, you don't have to sit there and like for 5 minutes or 10 minutes. That's not what I mean. But each breath, you can describe it. And then when you take that breath, and if you notice it moves a little, like if the pressure is in your stomach and you take a breath and that pressure starts to, let's say it moves up a little, or it starts to get smaller, there's just any little kind of movement, it's starting to exit your body. And that is what I want to add to those breathing exercises. When you feel angry, when you catch yourself in those arguments or yelling, that you do that exercise, because that is what is going to be the most effective in stopping yourself from saying things you don't want to, continuing the yelling, is to take that exercise and add that body scan. And it doesn't last very long. As long as your breaths are intentional, you can do it in 1-2 minutes. And I also want to add something to this that I think that gets miscommunicated in what I would call pop mental health information, is that it's not as if you need to stop the world in order to feel an emotion. It's not as if you need to sign up for yoga classes so you can be more in tune. I mean, that all helps for all different reasons. In order to have an emotion exit your body and process it and have it move through at a really quick place where you can just move through and go about your day, is just a few breaths to get that pressure, that tingling sensation, pinching, however you describe it, moving. Get that little bit of movement, and you can go about your day. And the key to it is acknowledging that emotion. It's not avoiding it and forgetting about it. It's actually honoring it with your mind and checking in with your body. So when you're doing that, if you find yourself in your head, go back to describing it, because a lot of times we come back into our head. Go back to your body and describe it like you're describing it to a 4-year-old or an alien, whichever analogy you like, and go about your day. You can process those emotions and still move forward in your life. There's no big, long pause you need to take. And it may seem really weird that you might need to spend a little bit more time on it, on taking those breaths and getting used to it, because it does feel, it's a new thing. If you haven't done it before, you will need a little bit more time. As you keep doing it, you can do this. And I do it even when I'm working, when I'm cooking. I am processing those emotions, and all I'm doing is my mind is just focusing on acknowledging where that pressure, that tingling sensation is in my body. So while I'm chopping up onions, I am intentionally breathing and going, okay, I feel the pressure. The pressure feels like a heavy brick weighted down at the bottom of my gut. It's about the size of a brick. It feels really hard. The color is of a brick, and that's all I'm doing in my head. I'm always just describing what's in my body. And then when I feel, let's say it's a brick, and I start to feel the brick kind of break up a little bit, then I know it's starting to exit my body. And I've processed that emotion. And that is the result you actually want out of that breathing exercise. You don't want to do breaths and breaths and not have a result at the end of that. So take in that intentional breath and do the body scan. And as you do it, it'll go faster and it will be less and less scary. That's all I have for you this week. I'll check back with you next.
Thanks for listening. Listen for a new episode next Tuesday by subscribing on your favorite podcast platform. Bye for now.